Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Quest for Truth. Um, I'm down in North Carolina for a few days this week, but we are still looking at our passage for today, which is found in Luke chapter 8, verses 22 through 25. Now, before we read through this, I just want to remind us that for the last 3 weeks ago, we started this kingdom passages of parables and narratives that are going back to talking about the kingdom from the beginning of chapter 8. And each week I've noted that because it's really important to understand what we're talking about. And as we get into today's passage, we're going to start to see some of the things that Jesus does while he's on earth, some of the miracles that he works that show us glimpses of what the kingdom of God, when it comes in its fullness, will look like. So we have the kingdom in partiality. You have the here but not yet kind of scenario where the kingdom has come, but it's not come in its fullness yet. But we get to see some of the glimpses of what it will look like when it comes in its fullness. So we're in Luke chapter 8, verses 22 through 25, and it says this. Now on one of those days, Jesus and his disciples got into a boat, and he said to them, "Let's cross over to the other side of the lake." So they launched out, but as they were sailing along, he fell asleep, and a fierce gale of wind descended on the lake, and they began to be swamped and to be in danger. They came up to Jesus and woke him, saying, "Master, Master, we are perishing." And he got up and rebuked the wind and the surging waves, and they stopped, and it became calm. And he said to them, "Where is your faith?" But they were fearful and amazed, saying to one another, "Who then is this, that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him?" So Jesus is, on one side of the Sea of Galilee, and he's going to cross over, and in the next passage we're going to see them on the other side in Gennesaret. But for now, he's crossing the Sea of Galilee. Now, in order to kind of understand what happens here and stuff, we have to know something about the Sea of Galilee, and that is that the Sea of Galilee was known for the storms that would come up very rapidly, and they would be very harsh storms. And so in the blink of an eye, all of a sudden there would be a storm that would come up and be pretty fierce. And the disciples, of course, many of them were fishermen, and they fished on the Sea of Galilee, and they knew the Sea of Galilee pretty well, and they were able to, use it for fishing, and they were well acquainted with it. And so they would have been, they were professional sailors, professional fishermen, and so they would have been, pretty much, if you're on the Sea of Galilee in a time of a storm, like, these are the guys that you'd want with you, right? The guys who had experience on this body of water. And yet in this passage, I think it's, when you realize that, you think about who these people were, who the disciples were, and they were terrified. That, when Luke says that they began to be swamped and to be in danger, he's not speaking from his own experience there. He's speaking from the disciples' experience. And then when you get into what they actually, when they wake Jesus up, they say, "Master, Master, we are perishing." Like, they understood the gravity of the situation. They knew that this storm could very easily take all of their lives, capsize the boat, and take their lives. I think there's something to be said there too, though, that they went to Jesus. The professional, sailors and the fishermen, they knew that they were in trouble. They knew that they were, facing death potentially, and they went to Jesus. They made the choice of going to him instead of trying in their own efforts. They went to him, which is very telling of, I think, when I read that, I think I see some faith in there, and yet Jesus even calls them out for it. He says, "Where is your faith?" After he steps in and calms the sea with a rebuke, with words, just speaking to the wind and the waves, and they obey his command, and they calm down. And in verse 24, where it says that they stopped and it became calm, literally it means that a calm occurred. And I think when we think of, like, especially when it comes to sailing on, a sea or whatever, we kind of think of the calm sort of as like the kind of the baseline, I think. When you go sailing, you don't want to have, big waves or wind or all of those things that make sailing difficult. You want to have a calm. And so I think we think of it as like a baseline kind of, and then you add in the wind and the waves, and it's almost as though Jesus is adding the calm to it, saying that in this world, the natural thing, because of the sin and the curse that with its effect on nature, particularly in this passage, the the most basic form of nature isn't really that calmness. It is almost that devastation. It's the wind, the waves, the hurricanes, tornadoes, all those kind of natural disasters and things that can, that take lives and all those things. Those are the norm because of the curse. And yet in this passage, a calm occurred. When Jesus spoke to the wind and the waves, they obeyed him, and a calm occurred. And so the calm, the stillness of the sea, the ceasing of the wind, the ceasing of the waves, the smooth sailing entered the picture after Jesus spoke. He commanded it to happen, and the calm entered the story. And that tells us so much about the kingdom. When you think about the kingdom of God, it's so much different than the kingdom that we live in, the earth that we live in, because the earth that we live in, we're accustomed to those kind of storms, to thunderstorms, rainstorms, windstorms, hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, all those different kind of things, earthquakes. And those are kind of, normal in some sense. We don't, they're devastating, and it's not something that we are, that we kind of brush off necessarily, but we're not surprised when they happen because they happen regularly, and it's, because of the curse. But in the kingdom of God, it's the complete opposite, almost the complete opposite. It's where Jesus speaks this calm in, and that's pointing to this kingdom where calm, in the natural realm, is actually what is there. We won't see the wind and the waves that are, devastating. We won't see hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes, all of these different natural disasters, we won't see them. They won't be a part of the kingdom. It'll be the calm in all of those aspects of nature. And so this small little narrative here, just of Jesus calming the storm here, shows us such a great picture of the calm, the natural return back to what nature was supposed to be like. When you think of the Garden of Eden, God created nature perfectly, and before sin entered the world, nature wasn't trying to kill people, right? People, Adam and Eve, were at peace with nature. They existed in it, and there wasn't poisonous animals. There wasn't even thorns that could scratch, or those kind of things even. And they didn't have acclimate weather and all those things. And the kingdom goes back to that. The kingdom goes back to this perfect earth, the perfect nature of the natural world, when the kingdom comes to earth. And Jesus shows us this little bit, and the disciples at the end, they say, "Who then is this, that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him?" And Luke doesn't give an answer directly. It goes right from there to the next passage. So we kind of end almost on a cliffhanger, but I think the answer itself to the question we've already talked about. Not directly, but indirectly. It's in this passage. Because they're not really asking a new question. They're essentially just asking, how could this, they've come to something that they can't quite grasp. It's something extraordinary that they've seen, and so they're asking, how can this be, basically. But the answer is in the story itself, what just happened, and what we've talked about. Well, who then is this? Well, it's, Jesus is the Son of God. He is the creator. All things that were created through him. That's, John chapter 1. But even more so, he is the king of the kingdom. When he comes, when he brings his kingdom, he is the king. And so all of nature obeys him, because he is the rightful king on the throne of the kingdom. And so, of course, the nature, of course, the wind, the waves are going to obey him, because he has the authority over them. And so the disciples here are struggling with it, trying to grasp what that actually means for this kingdom that they're looking for. But Jesus is the king. He has all authority. He is the king. And, it is his kingdom, and all authority is in him. And the kingdom, the nature of the kingdom obeys him. And so when he brings his kingdom, when he makes the earth new, all of nature will obey him and be in obedience to him. And so we see in this passage that Jesus is this king, and when he brings his kingdom to earth, he's going to reverse the effects of the fall on nature, specifically in this passage, and he's going to revert it to that original perfection that we see with the Garden of Eden. We're not going to see these these storms and harmful natural disasters that we see now, but we'll see a perfect earth that we will live in at peace. We'll be at peace once again with nature. And so what does this really mean for us as we kind of live in this kingdom? You know, we look forward to, and this is kind of the easy application. We look forward to the kingdom, right? We know that it's coming, and we can be thankful that we have a part in it as Christians, and that God will make all things new, that he will make nature new, that we'll be able to live at peace with nature. You know, and these natural disasters that are caused from the effects of sin will be reversed, and we won't see them forever. But even now, you know, God has power over nature. You know, he doesn't necessarily reverse these things all the time. This is a miracle. This isn't something that we always see, but he has the power to, if it's his will, to exercise that authority over nature. And so we can pray to him, and that he will, you know, reverse these effects, because we should be seeking his kingdom on earth. And part of that kingdom is not just, last week we kind of looked at the kingdom in our lives, in our hearts, but this week we see the kingdom in the world. And so our prayer should be that, you know, the kingdom of God comes to the natural earth, and that means the reverse of these natural disasters. But even so, when we look at these natural disasters that are deadly, that take many lives, we can still trust God, because we know that he has a plan, that he's already planned this out, and that he is working, even when he doesn't reverse these things like he did in this passage that we looked at, when, you know, what he will do in his kingdom when he comes. We can still trust God, knowing that he works everything for you know, the best outcome. And so even in these disasters that we see, God is still working to bring about good in the lives of man, and glory ultimately to himself. So that's our passage for today, all about the natural kingdom, nature, and how God will restore it, and this little piece that we see of the restoration with Jesus's miracle of calming the storm. And in the next couple of weeks, we're going to kind of continue and see different aspects of Jesus' miracles, and how they reverse the effects of the fall, and how we see his kingdom, just glimpses of his kingdom that we'll see ultimately when Jesus returns. So I'll see you again next week.